Excellent, excellent. So up we have coming Dan Munslow, executive producer of Target 3D. Excellent. Then we have Lucas Tucknut, head of production for Film Soho. And Nils Pauls, head of virtual Ready Set Studio Productions. Excellent. Well, welcome to the panel. We wanted to talk about the business models and general virtual production in the industry, business cases for virtual production. So the first question today is tell us about your roles and what you are currently working on. And Dan, we can start with you.
Hey, I'm Dan Munslow. I'm from Target 3D. I'm executive producer. So we're home of motion capture. And at the moment I'm working on a high-end fashion project that we've done performance capture. And we're working with an agency and director duo that are turning that performance capture into a meta-human for a big advertising campaign, which is going to be a photorealistic avatar, which is quite an interesting workflow. But yeah, for the last year I've been hanging out down in Guildford, working at the virtual production test stage, where we've been going through lots of different workflows, disguise and display, lots of different camera tracking solutions, lots of different LED, and just trying to work out a way of just trying to explain what it is.
Excellent, excellent. Lucas, what are you currently working on?
I don't know if this is going to work.
Yeah.
So I was a director of photography for about over a decade, and now I'm working at Film Soho. So Film Soho is obviously in the middle of Soho. We have a big ADR business, we've got a big distribution side of things, and we are now going to be building a virtual production stage in the middle of Soho. So
excellent, very exciting.
That's what we're up to. And we've got a couple of features that are in production, and they'll obviously include some VP as well. So
excellent, very excited to see you guys.
Hi, I'm Niels. I'm the head of virtual production for Ready Set Studios, a virtual production stage in Amsterdam. We've only been open for 6 months, so big part of my day goes to actually running a company. But I come from a technology background, very much like yourself, Brian. I had the luck of working for one of the world's largest AV rental houses. So I got to play with LED, with cameras, with media servers, and it all came together in virtual production. So what I do mostly is helping out clients, trying to figure out what the hell they want to do and how they can do it and how we can help them do it. And at the same time, trying to reinvent ourselves every single day with new plugins in Unreal, with new LEDs, with new lighting workflows, and so on. And it just never stops at this point, which is awesome.
Well, excellent, Nils. Your knowledge has been very helpful for Absen and working with you in all of our adventures together. So very good, very nice to have all of you here. We are curious, what is the business case for virtual production? Obviously, there's a lot of change in the workflow and change in cost, and some of it moves, some of it decreases, some of it increases. We'd love to know your input on what you think the business case is. Dan, we can start with you.
This is where I feel like I've got imposter syndrome. Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. No idea what the answer is, but we're trying to figure that out.
It's definitely a very tough one. I personally am researching a lot of it myself, and I find increased cost in some areas, but I think from the environmental standpoint and the location-based shooting, that there are definitely some...
Exactly. I mean, we always talk about that golden hour extension. Yeah, I was just at a conference down in Cardiff where the government have just announced a £56 million national centre for virtual production and some funding for 3 labs across the country. So there's obviously an appetite in the government level to try and make this thing work, and I think that's really at the skills end, trying to make sure there's people that actually can use these tools. But yeah, I mean, sustainability is a real interesting one. I've got, I'm slightly cynical about the numbers that are thrown out, but we all know that it's right, and we all know that we should be making production's more sustainable. And you know, simple automobile type situations where you can shoot a car and different backgrounds is just a no-brainer, right?
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, the business case overall of the huge studio side, I've got absolutely no idea.
Very honest answer. I like that. Lucas, what do you think?
Well, we're obviously the start of our journey. You know, we haven't, the stage is not ready yet, so I'm not going to try and claim that we're going to be any kind of an expert on the voice of this. But I think for us in terms of, or for me anyway, as a filmmaker, and the business case for it, and why would we build this stage in the middle of Soho? Like, why would we do it? It's obvious on two fronts. Obviously, kind of for producers, it's obviously going to be much more efficient for some productions. Like, it's at the end of the day, it's an incredible tool. And I'm not going to try and say that we're going to be able to shoot everything on this, because it's not. And we're certainly not going to be able to shoot everything in a 10 by 5 meter volume in the middle of Soho. Like, it's going to have its limitations, obviously. But I think from a production point of view, I've certainly battled with the weather, and I've battled in locations all over the world, kind of really, really struggling to actually get what I want out of the shoot and what we're trying to do. So for me, from a filmmaker and from production side and producing, I think obviously the budgetary, you know, improvement on budgets, and you're not having to fly people across the world, and you're not having to get these catering trucks into the middle of Hyde Park at 3 a.m. and whatever, you know, all those kind of factors. I think from a business case, from the production side of things, I think is really important. And then in terms of us as a company, why would we take this big risk and spend all this money? I think it's just, we want to be at the kind of forefront of filmmaking. I certainly believe this is the future of filmmaking, obviously, but like I said before, it is a tool, so we're not going to do everything in it. But I think it's nice for us to be able to kind of really push and work with our partners like Disguise and really kind of take it to another level, and how far can we go with this kind of fusion between the real sets that we're going to bring to it with people like Helix, and you know, it's how we're going to kind of blend this real physical sets, real worlds with the 3D, and make it look photorealistic, make it workable, make it really work for productions so they can actually get what they want out of it, because I think that's the real challenge.
Makes sense. Niels?
Well, if money wasn't an issue, then the business case is quite simple. It's all about creativity. It's all about people working together in a controlled environment, trying to make the best possible outcome happen on set whilst talking to each other. And that's everybody. That's not just the DP, the director, the gaffer, but also the makeup artist and the set designer, and you know, and matching colors and so on. Again, if money wasn't an issue, then it would be also sustainability. Filmmaking, in the largest sense, is one of the most polluting industries in the world. And now, well, my friend works for a creative agency, and they made a commercial for Candy Crush. And they went with 30 people for 3 weeks to South Africa. To me, that's absolutely ludicrous. It's just ridiculous. And they were even renting a studio there and building sets and so on. And that is just something that shouldn't be happening anymore. With virtual production, with in-camera VFX, because virtual production is obviously more of an umbrella term than what we do with LED walls. You know, the cost is shifting. It's shifting from post-production to pre-production and on-set production. Somebody asked the question if fix it in post is gone. No, it's not gone, but we can definitely fix a lot of things in pre at the moment. But money is an issue, and people need to be educated, producers need to be educated in how to spend their money wisely on beforehand, and people don't want to spend money on beforehand because it's dangerous and scary and difficult. But the creativity and the end result should always benefit from exactly this. And then as a studio, it's a giant leap. I mean, I feel for you, man. It's you know, you're spending all this money, you're borrowing left and right. You got investors, and then you got somebody coming in like, that's pretty cool demo. We won't use it. You know, so it's difficult, but it's I think it's definitely the future, and it's just a very, very good tool to have in your toolbox to do some things that would otherwise not be possible. just by being able to create a 2.5D or a 3D background where you don't have to deal with the laws of physics is something amazing. I mean, everything that happens in front of that LED screen, we still need to deal with physics. But anything that happens back there, you can do whatever you want. And that can be space, but it also can be photorealistic without gravity. It can be anything. So the opportunities are endless in my mind.
No, excellent. I think there's also a very large range of types of virtual production that you can do on these volumes, meaning you can have the enormous 200-foot wide, 30-foot tall volumes with enormous ceilings with real-time rendered content, which could be on the very high side of the cost, but you can also do something much more cost-effective, shooting plates on a much smaller LED wall with much more blocked-off shots that can create a completely different business case for different types of projects.
Absolutely, and that's why the 3D worlds are obviously the most entertaining ones to work on. But 2D plates are 90% of your business, and then there's 2.5D, which is amazing, as Zaira has already said. It's just a great tool to have in your toolbox again. Then you're not spending all that money in creating like full-blown 360 degrees 3D environments, but you can cut up a picture and layer it and still have a fake type of parallax happening and still create beautiful images.
I've seen that. It does look really impressive to use the multi-layer photorealistic to create parallax angles. It's really cool how that comes together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So here is kind of a follow-up question. What kind of investment do filmmakers need to think about in terms of virtual production, example set building? More importantly than just the LED, which is obviously a major component of it, there's a large talent side of this as well. Let's hear your opinions.
I think it was talking, the last panel, we're talking about collaboration and the recent tools in all of our lives have come in where we're actually able to collaborate on simplest thing is documents or drives and things like that. And the sort of the collaboration between virtual and real art departments is really interesting, and that will be something that will be it'll be working much better in a few years' time. I just really think that there's been a step change in production techniques across the board, and talking to some more traditional filmmakers, they've still got that old school production technique, and I really relish when that finishes and that they start thinking about post-production for previs, and we shoot a lot of motion capture, and it's been talked about where you were prevising with Grayscale 5 years ago, and everyone was very happy. And now we're getting more and more directors and producers coming in saying we want to previs almost Final Pixel. Okay, it's not quite Final Pixel, but we want to understand some kind of lighting on this 3D model, some kind of frame up or block, and that's really exciting. I mean, it does change the complete production process where you're having to re-budget, you're having to put things in different places, and that's really scary for certain producers that are up against it.
The art department now, instead of just being post-production, is actually in the storyboarding phase to understand what the heck they have to produce on the video wall. So
and this
team comes over.
And there's huge savings where you're not paying 4 different departments. You could just pay one and actually them see it through all the way. I don't know whether that'll happen this quick, but I hope so.
Lucas, this is a great question for you as you just are creating your studio. Tell us about some interesting investment considerations that you had to make.
Investment considerations, yeah. That's a tough one. I kind of want it, something I quite like, just going back for a second, something I quite like to talk about in terms of talking about traditional production workflow. Something for me that I think virtual production can really potentially help and take to the next level is this like work-life balance for people actually working on the ground in production, right? Because we've all been 6 days a week, we've been 3 months, and you lose touch with your friends, all this kind of stuff. And for people who have children, I've got 3 kids myself. Like I've had to move away from physical production, and I think it's an interesting moment that potentially we talk about technology, we talk about the image, we talk about kind of selling the realism. But I think for me, in terms of giving people the opportunity to continue working actually in physical production when it might not be possible for them to do so, whether they've had children, whether they just want to have a life, because we've all been through that before, where it's just very difficult to have that work-life balance. So I think virtual production on that side of things has an interesting kind of opportunity to completely revolutionize the way that we actually make production. Because we can do it quicker, because we can shoot it in a much more efficient way, I think we might be able to shorten the days, make things more efficient. But that's not very traditional, so I don't know how some people might feel about that. But I don't know about you guys.
Excellent. Nils?
You got anything to say?
Well, yeah, no, people still can't get their head around that you can be more efficient, but you have to be creative in being more, in being more efficient, and virtual production can help with that, but it's definitely not the holy grail of filmmaking. As I said, it's another tool in your toolbox. But I think the biggest challenge at this point is to get, producers on board, because usually DPs see the advantage of it, directors see it, gaffers sometimes see it, but producers, they want to copy their Excel sheet from last production, and all of a sudden, as you said, they see a virtual art department, and they see all these roles mentioned, which they never saw mentioned because it was post-production X, and now they see, oh, but wow, that's so many people. Do I really need that? And why am I spending all this money without knowing what the outcome will be? So I think that the biggest investment is for all of us that are already working in this industry. And I realize we're just like maybe 1% of filmmaking is actually working in virtual production, is to start educating our friends and colleagues. That's at least what my take on this. Yeah.
Education is a huge investment and absolutely necessary. I personally feel that there is a void in the industry of talented people who know how to design, run, and work on these sets. And so the people who do know how to do it do have, their weight in gold, essentially.
And keep up with technology.
It's always changing, and you're always learning, right? There's not one group or person who actually has every single answer about everything. So, related to efficiency, here's a very easy question to ask, but a very hard question to answer, is how would you measure your return on an investment compared to traditional filmmaking? I wouldn't know how to answer this without an entire accountant team comparing two different types of projects. But
all right, so it's an easy question to ask, and it's a difficult one to answer. So it's your efficiency obviously goes up as soon as you want to shoot somewhere that either doesn't exist or doesn't exist anymore, like history, or has never existed, sci-fi, or when you are shooting something in what's moving, so a car, a bike, a plane, a chopper, a spacecraft, a train, something like that. I spoke to the virtual production supervisor or virtual production, I don't know what her name is. She used to work for Netflix, and she did a series that was taking place completely on a train, and they think they saved about 38% on cost in visual effects. Does that mean anything? No, obviously not, but it can help you be more efficient. And I've worked on shoots where they shot 15 pages of driving scenes in one day. Where, as you're driving a van through the south of France, try to hit 15 pages on one day. It's near impossible.
Driving scenes make so much sense for a virtual
100%.
stage.
Yeah.
Trying to act with 4 people in a car and get dialogue between 4 people from 4 different camera angles on a live action shoot compared to doing the car process, I mean, that's a no-brainer, essentially. So, especially with frame remapping features that Brompton's bringing to the table now, so you can do multi-camera shoots simultaneously on one LED wall. It's incredible. Yeah. Lucas, what do you think?
Are you talking about the perspective, return on investment for the production, or for a facility like ourselves?
Well, great question. So how about you take it from the facility standpoint?
Well, it's hard to say because it's still a pile of rubble.
All right, good
Our
point.
screen has arrived, which is nice. So it's in some lovely boxes.
What are
Lovely
you hoping
Absen
for?
screen. We've got the 1.5 Absen screen, if anyone's wondering.
Okay,
It's in a
excellent.
lovely
Yeah.
wooden box.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Excellent. Very cool.
Well, the return on investment, obviously there'll be diminishing returns, like when it comes to kind of the rates that studios will be able to charge for this kind of facility. And I imagine the cost of LED might come down as well. So I imagine people throw around democratizing a lot. So I imagine over time it will obviously become more efficient for productions to use this more widely. And we're obviously kind of at the forefront of this moment where we're kind of really trying to sell it to people and kind of, okay, this is all this amazing stuff you can do. How are we going to possibly do it? So I think for us to measure the return on investment, it's from just purely financially, it will just be a numbers game, obviously. But the main thing for us to make sure we get our return on investment, we're making sure that we offer something that is completely as unique as it possibly can be, and to make it as easy for producers as possible, and for filmmakers and directors. Obviously, the benefits to actors don't need to be said. So I think I haven't really answered your question, have I?
Oh, I think it's some good information there. Dan, please.
Yeah, I guess I can come at it a different way. We don't have our own LED walls at Target 3D, so we came into it from the question of how do you track the camera, and we're like, we can track the camera, but we've got no LED. So we've actually partnered with Digital Catapult, and they've bought lots of LED, and they've bought it for reskilling and retraining. So the return on investment in our two studios is basically to try and reskill people. And I guess with the technology, although the LED might stay the same, it's going to last a while, right?
Mm-hmm, definitely,
Yeah,
absolutely will last a while.
And you know the walls that we're looking at buying that need to be installed before March. You know, we're also looking at, you know, can the process be upgraded? Is the software going to be upgraded in the future and things like that? So, I you know, if you look at it as a training exercise rather than a commercial studio exercise, which is the way that we're looking at it, you know, it's a no-brainer. So the return will be lots of people working in the industry, I guess.
I think it'd be really interesting to see compare a movie that was made traditionally and try to recreate the movie using virtual production and comparing the process and the cost. Obviously, I'm not sure how many people would watch the second version of the movie, but it's an interesting concept to look at.
Yeah.
Lucas, you have something to add?
Yeah, just on that point, I've heard, I was reading something and people were retrospectively looking at their budgets and their productions and refitting it as if they shot it on virtual production. I think people were claiming the savings were 30-40%. So
makes a lot of sense, especially for doing the crazy on-set location type of shooting.
And I think, it's just important that, again, we're not sitting here saying that we can shoot everything on VP, but I think the more people embrace it, the more people accept it, then I think we'll be able to push the boundaries on what is possible.
Excellent. So kind of on a little tech question regarding digital assets. In traditional filmmaking, you're using physical assets of props and hero cars and et cetera, et cetera. When working with digital assets, tell us some advantages that you see with working with that type of item versus a physical item.
Well, I think first and foremost, going back to sustainability, obviously productions are hugely wasteful. We see tons and tons of scrap metal and wood being wasted every day by huge productions. So the main advantage, obviously working digitally, is that we can sustainably power the machines that are operating them. Hopefully the manufacturers will build them in a sustainable way that we can do that. But obviously the advantage of being able to reuse these sets and just go back to them, there's no transport costs, there's no storage, there's obviously going to be a very low carbon impact of that. So that's a good thing. And then obviously going commercially, being able to take your assets and use them in gaming. I mean, Haz is probably a much better person to speak about it than myself because I don't know anything about it. But yeah, obviously you're working in Unreal Engine and you can use these assets across multiple disciplines. So yeah, I imagine for productions it's going to be very handy being able to just be like, hey, we've just shot this film and now let's make a game and it's going to take 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, scalable and changeable. Niels, what do you think?
Well, yeah, reusability for digital assets is a massive thing, and I think the longer virtual production will be around, the more digital asset databases will become available. We're working on one. I know Garden Studio is working on one. Unreal has got their own marketplace, which be careful with because not everything is VP ready. Definitely, as we well know. Yeah?
Not sure what you're talking about, Niels.
Yeah, exactly. But also changeability. I mean, you can literally take a tree and make it a red sequoia in a couple of clicks by the right artist, and reuse that same tree for a green forest the next day. Or the golden hour is always the perfect example, as you already mentioned. You can have 24-hour golden hour and in your studio. And if you actually want that cloud to be in front of the sun at one point, you can also do that. And if you want that cloud to be, a specific type of gray, or you want to have it bloody purple, I don't care, you can do that. So and then combined with the sustainability, I think it's 100% the future. However, it still needs to be matched to a smaller foreground. Because
that's actually an interesting point, right? A lot of times you're winding up matching your digital asset to the physical prop that you have because you can't repaint your physical asset.
100%. Yeah, we recreated Dutch Parliament from the 1992, I believe it was. Yeah, and the set designer went to Parliament and took color samples, and it turned out that the chairs had been redesigned 30 years ago. So there was a slight difference in green. Luckily, now in Unreal Engine, you can just redo it immediately, and it's done. But on a physical set, that would have been, near impossible. But also, it wouldn't have been necessary.
You can even do a LiDAR scan and grab the texture right there and import it into Unreal.
100%, yeah.
Take your physical asset.
Let's LiDAR scan the world.
Right.
That'd be amazing. Yeah.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. What comes first? The virtual prop or the real prop? We obviously come from a bit of a motion capture background, which we're doing with a lot of props. So we're scanning things that people bring into the studio. So we've actually got, we've got the scan ourselves. But then we work with clients that will bring in a very high-end piece of luxury something that they'll have an FBX of, but they'll also have the actual thing. We're kind of scanning and creating. Yeah, and it's interesting. A few of the virtual production shoots that we've had that have brought in near-ground props. That have brought in an Unreal scene with props in. They've actually decided, should we actually make some real props from the Unreal scene? Kind of doing it the other way around. So yeah, I always wonder what should actually come first.
It's an egg and an egg question.
Yeah.
Excellent. This actually leads into the next part of the question regarding scalability and reusing these assets. So if you invest in these digital assets for a very large scale production, is it useful to have these assets in a smaller production, or are they proprietary, or are they not really flow over?
Yeah, I mean, we're dealing with sort of a lot of digital twins now, so we're talking about real people, and we're obviously having them in a digital form to use later, which is very economical. If you look at people like ABBA and things like that, Elton John won't have his scan done, so he won't be making money after he dies. But on the people, sure. I'm not sure about the database of props and things like that. It always feels to us that we can never find the right one. So we actually end up creating things or asking clients to actually create. It is getting easier, right? Finding things, but it's still, I guess we're working in very specific genres that don't allow that crossover.
One of my friends actually works in a prop side of the film industry, and it's really interesting to find out how hard it is to find even real props. The real chair from 1940 from that hotel is they have to search the entire country for the right chair. Yeah. So I was kind of thinking that the digital world could be created digitally a lot easier than finding the physical asset, even though it's still a challenge.
Yeah.
Lucas, what do you think?
Well, I think anything as a filmmaker, like, anything like this is going to make our lives easier, allow us to be more creative. Just having all of this at our disposal that we can bring into our productions, at the drop of a hat, basically. That can't be a bad thing, right?
Absolutely.
And then, environmentally driving halfway across the country to find a chair and then bring it back. That can't be good, so it's got to be a win, right?
It's a lot of time spent on that, yes.
Yeah, and there's obviously also, besides 3D assets, there's also 2D assets. So, for example, there's a website called Driving Plates, which is sometimes awesome and sometimes it isn't. And one of the things we did is we built our own car rig because we were we demanded something a bit more than what was available to us. But that means that we now have Amsterdam and big parts of south of France ready to go, and you can use it if you want. But it might not be exactly what you need, and that's the same with 3D assets. It's not nothing off the shelf is ever exactly what you need, and you might still need to tweak it and make it better. But reusability is definitely I think the way forward, and the same goes for physical sets. If we come up with a different way of building sets and not using iron and wood and paint, but go for 3D printed or cardboard printed sets, then you can reuse those much more easily.
Excellent, excellent. Well, here's a very leading question for you. Do you believe that virtual production is more sustainable versus the traditional options?
No. No. Well, there's obviously, we're using a ton of electricity, right? And the green electricity is something that is up for debate. In Holland, we call it green as soon as the electricity wasn't produced in our own country. So you can get German coal-mined electricity and call it green electricity. But in terms of carbon footprint, I'm a strong believer that it is much more sustainable. And the 30 people spending 3 weeks in South Africa to film a commercial for Candy Crush alone, that's just stupid.
That's just a waste. Yeah.
It's waste. And then all the sets that are being demolished and built for God knows tens of thousands of euros of wood just in a container the next day, and carpet and glue and paint and everything else. So yeah, no, I 100% believe it is more sustainable. Like you said, I don't necessarily believe all the numbers that are being thrown out there, like Variety did a big infographic. But yes, it will be more sustainable.
Excellent. Lucas, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean,
That's why we're all doing it.
what
right?
he said, right? I think, yeah. I mean, I've been flown around the world to shoot. Someone sends me to Australia to shoot something for 2 days, and you think, I feel a bit guilty about this, So I think, of course, we got all these people turning up in their cars and doing this, and I think, if we can just reduce, obviously, whether we're kind of doing enough as a planet is a different question, but if, in terms of the film industry, if we can be less wasteful and more sustainable, then I think VP can help make that happen, yeah.
Excellent. Dan?
Yeah, we were talking about this yesterday as well, and it's really an electricity issue, right? And we've got no idea the price of the electricity or really where it comes from. We're talking about film projects need to have that, carbon footprint monitoring on it, whereas I'm not sure if studio productions actually have to yet. But yeah, it's a no-brainer for having a location that people can work closely to. And make that their home and not have to travel around the world is a no-brainer. And yeah, I think that we all want to travel less and we all want to get on less planes, and I think that's probably the best for the planet. So it's probably a good thing.
I agree. And of course, in this current economy that we're in, the amount of content that we're consuming as a culture is just absolutely ridiculous compared to years ago. So we have to create this content in some way. So I think exponentially that this will become a more efficient and sustainable way for us to create all the content that's being demanded.
I absolutely agree.
Excellent.
I think just going back to kind of, you were talking about digitizing physical props. I think an interesting concept might be, we're obviously building full-scale sets to use on full-scale productions. We could potentially build miniatures or scale models, so we could scale down our productions physically, and then we scan them, and then we put them in. And you could still use them for the wides, and you could do that kind of traditional process. But that might be a way of kind of making it more sustainable, as we're literally working with smaller scales of the physical sets. That could be another way to kind of make things a bit more accessible.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to see more of that. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here on the panel today.